I don't remember seeing it in there.
Okay.
And that first page.
So I love these. This is what I love about contracts, right?
Yeah.
This is the fun. It's not how do you fill a contract and it's what happens when. That's the contract, right, guys? So we're talking about addendas today, but we're also going to talk about the Ring doorbell for a brief moment. So they did beef up the what's included in the personal property in October. So we're going to go ahead and share our screen and we're going to take a quick peek at a contract. I'm going to blow this sucker up a little bit here to make it fill up my screen. All right, bear with me briefly. I think I need a mouse to make it a little quicker, but all right. Does that fill up the screen pretty good now?
Want me to grab a mouse for you?
Nah, it's okay. I'm just whining with the mouse. All right, so, oh no, I hit something. I don't know what I hit, but can I hit escape? Escape, escape. All right, so let's do this. Let's take a quick peek if it's gonna let me. And look at, let's go to a dot loop here. And let's go into loops. Okay, let's just look at any contract because every contract, remember, absolutely, whether we're talking about as is or a residential FAR bar, regular standard FAR bar, is exactly the same except for inspection, right? So the what's included, financing contingency, all of the hello, Miss Pippa.
Sorry.
All of the rest of the contract sections in terms of the disclosure language, all of that is exactly the same. So whatever I come to first, which, you know, the speed of my computer here, and I'm going to blame that totally on the internet. Surprise, I'm going to get the as is first. We're just going to jump here. We're going to take a quick peek. So does anybody, before I get there, want to say, here's the question, Pippa's just joined us. Anybody online want care to answer? A realtor comes to me this morning and says, Carrie, I go to the walkthrough. We're representing the buyer. The Ring doorbell is missing. Is the seller in default? This is the question.
I say yes. I'll say yes.
I got a yes, I got a yes.
It says doorbells, I guess.
All right, so here we go. It does say doorbell, but here is where it gets interesting. It says,
Ring doorbell.
it says
Yeah.
very include the following items which are owned by the seller and existing on the property as of the date the initial offer are included in the purchase. It does say doorbell.
Yeah.
So I sent her that and I said, send that back to the listing agent and say very clearly, this was included as of the date of the initial offer. And therefore we'll be expecting you to either put that Ring doorbell back or give us a new one. So the reality is I still would say clarity is king. If you want a Ring doorbell, write it in there. Be very clear, because what would that have hurt for you to take 2 extra seconds to write? Ring doorbell, nothing. It would have been very clear for everybody that you're anticipating to get the Ring doorbell. But the truth is they've added doorbell in there, which was not in there prior.
And television wall mount. said
Television wall mount
hardware.
was added, television mounting hardware security was added in there. They've added extra stuff because these are the items that people were removing, that people were complaining when they were being removed.
How do you prove that?
That it was there at the time of walkthrough?
Take a picture of it?
Yeah, I guess. I mean, a picture, but more than likely,
Like from your home inspection or?
it could have been the inspection, but at a Ring doorbell, if you took a picture of the front of the house, if you zoomed in, you probably would see that Ring doorbell. The Ring doorbell would be easy. Some of these other items, not as easy, right? I mean, smoke detector, seriously, are we having to write that down there? I mean, there's some things in here that you're like, what? But they have.
What's the deal on like a washer and dryer or something, like an appliance?
So here's the
If
thing.
someone like switches it to it up here.
So here's the question. It says was included on the property at the time you saw it, right? That's what it says. What if they had another one that was on the property, like in the garage at the time you saw it? Could they constitute saying it was there? They could.
Well,
It's
if you're
just-
connected though.
Well, again, this is where you get gray. I'm just gonna tell you, if it's me and I see that there's a fancy Samsung that's singing to you, I'm gonna write that model down and I'm gonna put it in there
You know,
as to,
take a picture of it too.
you could take a picture of it or you just write down front loading Samsung that sings to you, write the model
Yeah,
number.
yeah.
But put that down in the actual property that will be conveyed. Don't just right washer and dryer, because if there is more than one washer and dryer that's on that property, who's to say they couldn't switch it out? They are very clear to say, as of the date the initial offer, what, was included on the property. They have added that language, but still, all in all, it's still somewhat gray. But yes, to the point, a Ring doorbell will be very clear and easy to show that if you had looked at the front of the property and that's the first picture in the MLS, you probably will see a Ring doorbell there. So that was an easy one for Sharon. But I would tell you, yeah. Any other questions about that, guys? Now, what if, here's just throwing one more out at you. What if to this language, there was a chandelier and it was in the picture, but in the MLS, it says the chandelier in the dining room is to be excluded, but you didn't write it in there as to be excluded in the contract. And you get to the walkthrough and it's missing.
It still has to be in the contract. Okay.
So here's the question. Is it supposed to come or is it not? It said it was in the picture. There was a chandelier in the picture, and the MLS, it said the chandelier is not being conveyed.
Still the
It was
contract.
never written in here that it's not to be conveyed. Yes, you guys are right. I'm giving the evil looks just to see if I could get you to turn. You are right. It doesn't matter what the MLS says. It doesn't matter what the pictures show. If it is not in the contract, it is not in the contract. If you did not exclude it from that contract, it is being conveyed. I don't care what they put in the MLS. So that is on the fault of the listing agent who missed it. Period, end of story. So I hope that you're not the listing agent who missed it, because you're not getting any referrals there and you're probably going to end up paying for that one. That's a really bad one. Everybody with me on that? Okay.
I have something I'd like to add.
Yes, Miss Maria. Can everybody hear Maria?
If y'all could not put in, like, even though I realize that it's talking about like furniture and things like that go in, it says it's gonna be left and has no value. It still opens up a can of worms. If you have a house full of furniture, it has some value, even though you may say, so.
So
it makes
you
it
don't
really
like,
different.
Miss Maria is saying that she does not like, when we put under here, the home is being conveyed fully furnished at no additional cost or value, which is exactly what we write. We write that because we had one attorney who is representing the buyer who wanted to have a bill of sale, right? Jules, is Jules on this? Oh my Lord, that was horrible. You were involved in that. What a mess. What does a bill of sale then require?
That it's worth money.
Value.
That it's worth money. Now you're gonna pay tax,
Yeah.
right? Is Jules on here? What a mess. Now you have to pay sales tax. What a mess is that? And if we don't collect it, guess who they're gonna come to? They list the buyer's agent. So that's gonna be a real big mess. You don't wanna be involved with the IRS coming after you saying you didn't collect the sales tax. Now it's on you to pay that.
Carrie,
Yes.
I have a question.
Sure.
Do you remember back in the day when people used to put in one of those lines per MLS and then put the number in it?
Oh, I do. Oh,
I mean, I actually paid for a washer and dryer years ago because I didn't have a savvy broker like you, who said, no, it's on the MLS, the washer and dryer. I said, it's not in the contract. And he's like, well, I put per the MLS. Now, so I paid for the washer and dryer.
I am so sorry that you had that broker. But yeah, no, per MLS means absolutely nothing. The only time per MLS would mean anything is if you actually incorporated that into the actual contract, which would mean that you would had to have checked other and written MLS synopsis and included the MLS synopsis and had all parties initial or sign it. Now you have incorporated that MLS synopsis into the contract, and now whatever it says is now included into the contract. That is the only way you can include that.
Question, it may be a question for like a 1031 person.
Yep.
But can they do a 1031 with all the furniture included? How does that?
Yeah,
work?
1031 doesn't matter if there's furniture included or not. Again, that's.
Well, and even if there's furniture included and that's the way all the condos are.
Yeah,
but
exactly.
That doesn't really matter. It just always throws up a red flag from an appraiser's perspective. when stuff's included, and they say it's no value, but when you're looking at it, you can see it's, that's. difficult sometimes.
So, this is the problem. If we don't, you can't write see additional addenda and then not include the addenda for the lender either. So
And
that's
you
the
wanna
problem.
protect the buyer,
But you
whatever
need to
want.
have it in an addendum. Now, could you have an addenda and not include it on this contract here? That's what we do.
Yeah.
Do we like to tell the lender, cover your ears, please? Yeah.
No, I know.
So you would write a contract and then on an addenda, which you don't give to the lender,
Right.
you
And don't
write,
check the box on page 11.
Yeah,
that have
you
it
would
in
do
there.
it after the contract and then you would say,
And
home
don't
is
number
being
it.
sold, completely furnished at no additional cost or value. And do not just do it after the contract. And you just don't share that addenda. It doesn't make it wrong. It doesn't make it right. Is it full disclosure to the lender? I'm not saying because we don't want to be party to that, but the
But your
reality
lender will
is,
thank you.
but your lender will thank you. Everybody get on that? You had a question?
That was my second question.
Yeah.
That's what we usually do.
Yeah,
Make
that's
sure
what we do. And it's one of those things. It's like you try to make the lender happy, but buyers and sellers must agree, right? And so they need to get this stuff in writing. That's the problem. And we want to make sure that they have it on an addenda, but we just have to make sure that that addenda comes after the initial contract.
And especially things like long post occupancy.
Yeah, long post occupancies. We hate those. I hate any post occupancy, post or pre-occupancy. They're all awful. But we want to make sure it comes on an addenda between both parties. They're signing it, whether or not you give it to the lender, don't talk to me about it. But they all need to be signed and in writing, because if it's not, then you don't really have an agreement between the buyer and seller. Now, let's say, God forbid, they want to purchase a piece of something, furniture or something, and there's money changing hand. Guys, do not be party to that ever. Don't take the money. Don't put it in writing. That is between the buyer and seller. As soon as you get involved with anything with money, now who's collecting sales tax? Don't get involved in that. That has got to be between the buyer and seller and not you. Is that clear? You can't get involved in that. That gets ugly every day of the week. That has got to be outside of the sale, and you don't want to be involved. You can say, put it on a piece of paper, make sure that you two deal with it, but you do not get involved with that. Do not put it on a Premier Sotheby's addenda. Do not put it anywhere, because as soon as there's money being changing hands, now there's something called sales tax that needs to be collected. And you do not want them coming after you for not collecting it. So you need to pay that, because that's going to be ugly. Everybody good with that? Hello, Miss Tammy. All right, let's jump into addenda, because this is what we really want to talk. Well, actually, let's look at some
I
of
have
the.
a question.
Yes.
If you're selling a property, I'm representing the buyers on this one,
Okay.
and there's a current lease that needs to be taken over, does that need to be written in the contract? Or,
Addenda, you would want to, first of all, if there's a lease, when they're taking in, they're purchasing the property. Are you a buyer or seller? Whose side are you on?
I'm on the buyer side.
Okay, first of all, if this property that they're buying was subject to a lease, this must be checked right here. Correct? So if they're purchasing a property that already is leased, it has to be subject to a lease, right? This must be checked. And then within 5 days of having an executed contract, they must see the lease, because your buyers have a right to accept or deny this lease, because they have to feel comfortable that tenant's rights of ownership, of usage, supersedes their own. So they have a right to accept that lease or not accept that lease. Once they've received that lease, which has to again be 5 days within the effective date of the contract, they have 5 days to accept or deny that lease within writing. If they don't, if they pass that 5 days, they've accepted it. They've missed that contingency.
So I didn't check that. If I check that now, we just go back, everybody goes and puts a little initial, is that fine?
So when did the contract get effective?
Yesterday, 8 PM.
Yeah. Go back, check it, make sure it's almost like a counter, but you have to. It is, I mean, that should have been done by the seller. It is subject to a lease. If there is a tenant in that property and that tenant is going to supersede the ownership time. So when your owner takes possession of that property, a tenant will be in there. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yes, that box needs to be checked.
Okay, anything else, any other addenda that needs to be added?
Yes.
to this?
Well, it depends. Is it short term or is it long term?
Long term.
No, now you just need to get the lease.
You
You
just
are
need to
there.
go for lease, and then they do a new lease, because I'm not doing a lease.
They don't need to do a lease. They have 5 days to give you the lease that they're currently in. Their lease supersedes the transfer of ownership. That's the whole point. So whoever's the tenant right now, that tenancy that they have supersedes the ownership transfer. And so whatever the terms of that lease is, your buyers have to be okay with it because they
And
are.
if they are okay with it, what's the next step?
Then they just go ahead and put in writing that they're fine to move forward. Or if they don't put it in writing, they're gonna be waiving that contingency anyway. Short term, there's an addenda for that. Because
Okay.
it's the same thing. Even if it's a short term, let's say it's a condo hotel like the Grove, right? And they have to be okay with the management lease. There's an addenda for that. Because they have to be comfortable with allowing their property to be agreement to having it go into this management company and their usage rights still being minimized, right? Because let's say you're in a condo hotel and you only have a certain amount of weeks you could use it, and the management company is saying, this is how we're going to rent it out, and you can't let anybody else rent it out. Again, their usage and their ownership rights are minimized, right? So that's what there's an addenda in here now for. So that's an addenda. But in terms of the long-term lease, there's no addenda, but you have to check this box. You have 5 days that the listing agent after the effective date has to give you that lease. Then your buyer has 5 days to accept that lease or not. And it's a true contingency. They can get out of the contract. Everybody clear on that?
That's what I'm having right now, so the buyer willing the tenants to stay in the property.
If they're okay, then you can put in writing, we're okay. And if you don't put in writing, you're just waiving it anyway by not doing anything. Yeah. But remember, the most important thing is, like, let's say you go to a listing presentation and they say, oh yeah, we have a tenant in place. I say, okay, I need a copy of that lease. And they say, oh, it's my uncle, my brother, my sister, whatever. They've been renting me for years. We don't need a lease. You need a lease. You absolutely need a lease. It needs to be in writing because that lease needs to be, first of all, accepted by the new buyer. That is the most important thing because those ownership rights are minimized by the tenant. That tenant gets to use it, not the buyer, right? That tenant is in there living there, not the buyer. So that buyer has to understand what those parameters look like. And that's why they need to be able to review it and they have 5 days to do that. Everybody good? So let's first look at, and we're going to open another dot loop so we could do this simultaneously. If I can see where my dot loop is. There we go. All right, so let's take a peek at the back of any contract. Now, again, if it's a residential, it has 2 extra addendas that the as is doesn't, and we're gonna look at that. I want you to see, most importantly, when you are looking at addendas, first off, to find the right addenda in dot loop, you wanna search for the exact name that you see here, okay? And the other thing is, let's say we were looking for, we all know what a condominium rider is, right? Homeowners Association. Let's just take a peek at one. So the best way to look for anything in dot loop, let's take a quick peek, is we go to templates and we go under Florida Interactive Forms, right? Everybody good with that? You have to highlight it. Okay, and then we come up here. Now you want to start typing exactly what we said. So home owner. Now, when we see homeowners, look at this. You see you have 2 homeowners association addenda. You guys see that? Every addenda almost, there's always 2. Does anybody can tell me why?
One's a crisp.
Yes, Miss Emily, my gold star student. There are, for those of you who are new with me, 2 legal teams that make contracts for all the Florida realtors. One is the one we go with, the FAR bar, right? The Florida Realtors Legal Team. The other one's called the CRISP team. So and they're both contracts in here. We just never in our area use CRISP. I have seen Tasha's gotten a CRISP one. I've seen people in the Panhandle use the CRISP, but typically in our area, we don't get CRISP. Yeah.
We have one addendum that we have to use. It's a crisp, right?
Yes, we
Is
do.
that the VA?
No,
No.
it's FERPTA.
FERPTA, okay. I was like, I know there's one.
There's one, yeah. But for every other addenda, there's always 2 forms because CRISP has one and FARBAR has one. So you're gonna hover over and you see how this says FARBAR right there? You guys can see that? And then if you hover over here, you see how it says at the very end, CRPS? No, CRSP, sorry, I can't even say that right. Dyslexic or something. CRISP, and you see this is FAR/bar, right? See that at the end? It tells you the legal association team that made the document. You always want to pick the FAR bar. If you pick a CRISP form, and I see it all the time, and you put it with a FAR bar, it does not match our contracts. In some instances, it's actually contradictory to our contracts. So where I see it often is the FHA one. People always put the wrong FHA one. It's terrible. And it doesn't match our contract. So you got to be really careful with that. So let's take a quick peek at the homeowners. This one changed.
Is that in
Dot loop. It's everywhere. If you are in transaction plan, if you're in form simplicity, if you're dot loop, if you're app files,
They have both.
all of the forms come from the same feed. So dot loop's feed is the same as all of the other feeds. So all feeds are the same and they all have the same ones. So I want you to also see right here, every contract you're going to see has the intention, the buyer's intention to cancel within 3 days after receipt of this disclosure. You guys see that right here? You see this? Cancel within 3 days? This is in the contract and it's on the addenda. Does everybody understand that if you do not have this signed and give the people their documents for the homeowners association, condominium is the same unless it's new, then it's 14 days. The buyers, this starts their 3-day right to rescission. They have 3-day right to cancel with homeowners docs. This is why people don't understand how important homeowners association documents are. This is a whole new contingency to cancel. This is a big one. This is one of the #1 reasons that people, this is one you can't miss. Almost every community that we sell has a HOA, right? There's so very few communities in our area that does not have a HOA. But this is one of those ones. And that's why I tell you, when you have a listing, get those HOA docs up there. Get this homeowners association document up there because it starts the 3-day right to rescind. Now, yes, we're in a seller's market, so do we care? No. But when things change and it's a buyer's market, are we going to care? Yeah, this is bad. And investors know this. And this is something they used to use all the time. They would not get this. They'd wait. They'd have all these contracts out. They'd pick which one they want. And then they go back and say, oh, I didn't get my HOA docs. You didn't give me the condominium.
I
And stuff.
thought if they sign this, they're saying they got
Yeah, they wouldn't sign it.
it. Ah.
And you know how many people wouldn't put it up there?
You know how many people sign it and don't even know that
I know, they have no idea. You know how many agents don't even know that there's a 3-day right to rescind? Yeah, you know how many people you ask condominium how long? They say 15 days. First of all, new condominium is 14 days. It never was 15 days. Nobody has any idea. This is the problem.
Carrie, what about so they have to give us the bylaws and the covenants, right?
Well, the problem is we don't always get all this good stuff. And the homeowners association, so I will only talk to the owner, #1, but a lot of times we can have the owner go log into their online portal and get this. But there's certain documents. We need the covenants, deed restrictions, we need the budget. So there's a certain declarations, there's certain things that we need to have. But the most important thing is if we give this to them, it starts the right to rescind. And what we have to tell them is how much they have to pay, how frequently they have to pay, if there's any special assessments, right? What if they're going to be changing the pool codes or they're going to be adding new things, or what? We need to know that, right? If there's going to be any extra, maybe they have, for example, they have an extra fee for some kind of extra recreation thing. We need to understand what that is. But this is the big one that people forget right here. Does anybody even know what these things are for right here? Capital contribution is a big one. They call it different things: initiation, initial contribution, building the reserves. You could call it whatever the heck you want.
it's almost never filled in.
Another way to get money, it's almost never filled in. Let me tell you, if you sell Laureate Park, you better fill this in because that fee's like several $1,000s. I want to say like 6,500 or some crazy number. It's a lot of money. If you don't know this and you don't fill this in, this will kill your deal. Celebration. Yeah, how much is it? Do you know?
I think it's not that much compared to Laureate.
Laureate Parks is
It's like,
ridiculous.
yeah, it's like 1,000 or something.
Mm-mm. Lawyer Park gets
They
you
may
coming
have
and going too, by the
Separate
way.
ones for the condos or the.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. And by the
they have
way,
neighborhood
guys,
ones.
The master one.
yeah,
Yeah.
if you're in Baldwin
neighborhood
Park, for
one.
example, and you own a condo, you need the condominium association and the HOA association because you belong to both.
You put them both on there? or
You
put
need them
separate?
both. Yep,
So
you need them
who
both separate
fixes this?
documents.
The
This
listing
needs to
agent?
be done by the
Oh,
listing
yeah, 'cause
agent.
condos is
They need to get it from the seller, right? But this is a question, and maybe it's once for life for capital contribution made out to the association. But if you don't do this, you may not be held liable, but I guarantee you, you might blow your deal up. Right here, this is a deal killer in Moyer Park.
The listing agent is telling me that she doesn't know this and the last bylaw she has is from 2000. I said, well, I don't care, get the new one. So I'm right now writing an email to the HOA and everything to get that myself because I just want to get the deal moving.
Mhm.
But she said she didn't write in the capital contribution because she's not sure how much it was.
Yeah,
Can't the title-
sounds
1.5%,
so
Carrie, 1.5% commission. I gotta love my buyers, seriously. And she does nothing.
Yeah. Yeah, there's Staple and you won't have that yet. That's the problem. And then what happens, like the condo association has the condo questionnaire, but HOA doesn't, but HOA can charge for their questionnaire, which they're doing. But the problem is you're right, exactly what's happening. You're getting these people that are not low professionalism and all of that, and they're lazy and they're not doing their work. And this is the problem. And half the time they don't care. They just don't care.
Sellers just really don't know.
And the
especially if they haven't
sellers
bought
don't
it in a
know.
while, they don't know that
Well,
there's
and
a
it
capital
changes. The capital
But the
contribution is-
seller should
They have to
call
write.
because the seller is the member of the association. The association does not need to talk to us because we're not members. But they
usually
do
everything's
need,
online now for the seller,
it
right?
should be, not every association's online, but most associations are online. It's so true. So they should say, go to your online portal and look it up, or have the seller make a phone call. But also, how many times is the listing agent not even in control of their seller?
Or they're not talking.
Or not talking to their seller?
You back in the week.
Yeah, let's be honest, or scared of their seller, all right? Or like, exactly. So these are the problems. You got to say to your seller, call your HOA and get this information, please. So that's the problem. Tammy.
So my question is making sure I understand this brief right. Is it, we have to have the,
Alexa,
it's
what time is it in Utah?
itself, right? It's just
In Utah, it's 8:29 a.m.
some of the details of the document, right?
What it says is, if this disclosure by Florida statute has not been provided executing the sale, this contract is voidable by delivering the seller's agent representative the intention to cancel. So we're giving them the disclosure. In the condominiums, it's more that they have the right to review all the documents. The truth is, could they fight it over the documents? They could, but in a homeowners association, rarely is it as much the restrictive covenants, unlike the condominium where they have more of the ownership rights and like more of the deed restrictions, right? So condominium is a little different than the homeowners association. Those are much more restrictive. So here it's more this particular condominiums, you have to provide all of those things and they have a right to review all of those documents. Here it's more about giving them this. But this is where, if you didn't really fully give it to them because you didn't explain that they had a capital contribution of, $6,500, some crazy number, right? Did you give it to them? Really? Did you explain it to them? Like, could they get out? They probably could. If they had an attorney, probably were very easy for them to get out. I'm just saying, the most important thing is this is a deal blower upper. Right?
It helps if you can give it the other way. Just think what if you want the buyers to-
Exactly. How do you think the buyer's gonna feel when they call and find out that they get to closing, that on their bill, they suddenly have a capital contribution of even 2,500. 2,500 to a family can make a big difference if they're
So
coming to
probably
closing.
even due diligence as a buyer's agent, thinking out loud.
Yeah.
If it's not filled out, to say, hey, did you confirm?
Yeah, what, is there any kind of monies that they need to come up with to build reserves of capital contribution? Absolutely. And then they need to know who to be able to contact here, for sure. So and how many times do you see this whole second page not even filled in?
Not every single.
Every
I
single
very
time.
rarely see
So that's the
anything
whole
but that.
reason, by the way, 3 years ago, I think it was when they changed this. When was this changed? Well, actually, they just changed it in 1021, but that's not, this page wasn't changed. This page was changed like 2 years ago. They added this second page to make it easier for people to get the information they needed. Because deals kept falling apart because people weren't explaining that there was a capital contribution. Now they added the second page and now what happens? It's still blank. Hey, Alex. So how much did it help? We don't know. But you know, for a good agent, it did help. Any questions about this? Oh, by the way, is the association required? This is important because sometimes associations are not required, right? Sometimes there is an association that's optional. Not all the time, it's very rare, but you do want to understand that if it's not required, you still can get this information, but you do want to let them know if it's required or not. And there are a couple of older ones down the Conway area and such that they may not require. You know what?
I think that one over there, by that big church, right?
Oh, yeah.
Isn't
That's,
that-
I think that one was not required. Yeah.
Yeah.
So there are a couple of areas where it's not required. So just so you know. Okay, everybody good on that one? Okay, so let's take a look at some of the let's look at FHA-VA addenda because nobody understands that one for some reason. Everybody good with that one? Notice, oh my, there's two. We all know why. See the second one says Chris? We know it's the wrong one, right? But what is interesting is if we started putting in FHA, it is actually the wrong one. It's Federal Housing Administration. They actually spell the whole thing out. So a note here is don't type the whole thing in when your less is more in dot loop, because if you type too much, it sometimes you don't get everything. And you can always see at the very bottom, right here, the FAR bar. See that? Florida bar.
What
That's-
does the other one say?
Crisp.
No, but I mean, how does it look?
Oh, it's totally different. It's still 2 pages, but it's just, we can look at it, but
That's okay.
it's different. Okay, so this was just changed also in October, and here's some different things. So first explains the contract, what it is, what property is, what the HUD, the Housing Department of Urban Development is, what a VA is. Okay, inspections and appraisals. This is interesting. They're letting you know that sometimes the appraisal can actually require that you have to have some things fixed. But here you can set the limit of how much those appraisal limits could be. Notice they do not say if left blank. Let me ask you, so if you don't write anything there, how much is it?
Unlimited.
Is it unlimited or is it zero? Who knows? This is the problem of a contract that's left blank. So if I'm telling you, whether you're on the buy side or the sell side, don't leave things like that blank. Fill it in, $100, $250, $0. It doesn't matter, just put something in there. Because it doesn't say if left blank. Now, if you're FHA, you check this. If you're not FHA, you don't. You can just leave it. Now notice here, it says, and this is what's really different about the FHA and VA. They're letting you know that here you must have an appraisal value for the property, not less than this amount. This is the purchase price. In an FHA, they will not give a loan, correct, Maria, if it's less than the purchase price of the house. Is that correct? In an FHA loan? Really? So if I was gonna buy a house, if I was getting an FHA loan, and the house, if I was putting 3.5% down, the house cost $300,000, and it came in less than $300,000. Let's say it came in at $295. Will I still get the loan if I want to pay the difference? So they'll still give me the loan.
See, look there, it says the purchaser shall have the privilege and option of processing consummation without regard to them.
So just like a VA now. So it's just that they don't have the money.
If they don't have the money, then they won't get
Or
approved.
it could just be a credit score. That's why they don't have it.
Well,
Sometimes they
they're
have the
usually
money.
either
Usually
probably
it's
both.
Exactly.
So, but the point is here, you're setting the purchase. Same thing. The fees and prepayments. Notice that here, purchaser shall pay the loan expenses of the buyer's lender and the seller shall pay a maximum of, if left blank, they say $100. So they're giving you that amount here for FHA. The appraisal repairs are letting you know and their certification. We undersign the purchaser, the broker, the transaction individually, jointly, blah, 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 acknowledge and believe that all parties in connection with transaction attached to them. So the VA, the FHA is pretty straightforward and clear. The only thing that is left blank, they've now capped at $100. So if you don't put anything, they've put it as something. Now the
You know
V,
what's odd though,
this has been changed in October.
because couldn't you potentially put something in that figure less than the sales price?
That's what I'm saying. You could never do that before in FHA. It used to be the sales price. If left blank, the price of the
Right,
property.
right.
They don't have that anymore. That's what I'm saying. That's what's changed.
Because if you know it's not gonna appraise, you can put that figure in, I don't know.
That's why I thought it was weird, because this is what's changed as of October. But
Yeah.
how could you do that in an FHA loan? Because you're gonna get denied.
And
Let's
then-
say the home,
I think
Yeah.
if you have cash, but you have the most credit. Have a newer borrower.
But
your
that's what
credit
I'm
score is
saying.
low, Not because you're bad.
but in an FHA, would they, I mean, they're harder to get that loan. Would an FHA really give them the loan?
Well, you gotta look at it this way too. Sometimes you're at the max loan amount.
That's what I mean.
So like it could be a $400,000 or, well, I did change, a $500,000 house and it's only, I always forget the number, 420.
Right?
So you could still go FHA and it could still appraise for less and you could still buy it.
Here's trying to figure out what's the benefit, why would they do that, not go?
Well,
Why would they?
well, no, they probably would have done it because they didn't have credit or they didn't have the money down,
Well,
but to
usually-
your point, like, let's say,
We just go one and some help.
Yeah, you're allowed to.
no, but I'm saying to your point, let's say it comes below and it kicks them out, like, you know, you could put it down below a number that you know that they won't get the loan, they'll get denied the loan. You could have written that in
You
there.
could have. I mean, like, that's odd
Yeah.
that it would.
It doesn't cap it there. Yeah, I'm just saying for here, you could have written it below the number that you could still get denied the loan. You know what I'm saying? Like,
Almost like if they're not watching.
yeah, you
that's
could,
the thing.
that's the
Yeah.
thing. Like you couldn't do that before. And the
No,
other one that
that's
capped you
odd.
where you had to put it where it would still get the loan.
Right.
Here, you could actually pad it where you could actually put the number where you can't get the loan. Like, it's
Yeah,
weird.
it's weird, yeah. Potentially,
Yeah.
Let's be honest, the minute any seller sees
FHA.
Yeah, well, it's true.
Yeah.
I'm not really worried about it, guys, because we're not even taking the FHA, but that's a weird change because it's almost like it's like a catch-22. You could sneakily put something in here
Yeah.
that you could get away with,
Good.
right? Like,
If
you're
someone's
like,
not paying
if you're not paying attention, you could like build in your contingency right there.
Yeah.
It's weird, but who cares? Because we don't take FHA. So moving on. Yeah, but you couldn't do that before because beforehand it capped you at the purchase price. But now they're not. So you could really put it below a number that you know you're going to get denied, which is weird, right?
But I would think that the seller.
Well, you would think the seller would catch it, but
There's so many bad agents, you never know.
I know. Okay, is anybody online catching what I'm saying here? There's nothing here that prevents the buyer's agent from putting a number that would allow the buyer to give yourself a total out on this contract, is the point. So just to say, if you get an FHA, if your seller is willing to accept an FHA, be careful with this number. This number could be a complete out for your buyer, for the buyer to get out, because it could already be a number that the buyer will already be denied the loan, is my point. Because there's no limit here, right? This is weird. I don't know why this has been written this way, because it's a bizarre, you all following what I'm saying? It's pretty weird. Okay, but no one, you all know that now. Okay, anyway, VA. Moving on to VA. We already know the great thing is that the VA can certainly pay more than what it appraises for as well. The difference with the VA is they usually do have the money because they're not putting anything down, right? And that's the great thing. So they have the right and the privilege to pay more. Again, they have it if left blank, and it's up to $250 that the VA regulations allow them to pay for the taxes insurance. By the way, we never pay taxes. I don't even know why they talk about taxes, hazard insurance, flood insurance, all that. Here's another thing. So here's a question for the gold star. So WDO, right? Wood destroying organisms. Is it required by the VA administration in the state of Florida that the seller pays for the WDO. Does anybody?
No, it's not required.
Anybody?
Required anymore.
Well, nationally, in many, many states it is, but you guys are right. In the state of Florida is one of 13 states that strangely, it is not required. Why Florida, though? You'd think it's one of the states that would be required. But I will tell you to be very careful if you are dealing with a national lender, like USAA maybe, or Navy Federal, it could be an overlay that they require it here in the state of Florida, right? That could be an overlay.
Could be, yeah.
Yeah, it could be. I mean, we don't know. But so sometimes it gets written in that the seller has to pay the WDO. So just be aware of that, that could be part of the contract. So if you are dealing with VAA, either tell your seller they may have to pay the WDO, see if they'll be open to it, or ask the buyer if their lender requires that. Because a lot of buyers, buyers agents think they're super smart and they think it's required by the VA. And they're right in many states, but not in the state of Florida. So just so you know, it is not a requirement by the VA administration here in the state of Florida. Strangely
So
enough.
is there, because I feel like an agent recently said something to me, to take VA, then the seller is responsible for X. and I can't remember what
They
it
were
was.
trying to say that the seller is responsible to pay for the WDO
I
inspection.
think it was.
Tax service
It
fee.
was that,
Tax service
okay.
fee.
I was like,
Up to $100. I think it's in there.
It is right here. That's what we're
Yeah.
talking about, tax service fee. Right here, escrows, taxes, hazard insurance, and flood insurance, but
Is there something about that?
no, it just says they have the right and the privilege to pay a different amount if the house doesn't appraise. So then it says appraisal inspections that the cost of appraisal repairs exceeds the limit imposed by paragraph 2. The seller must within 3 days after receiving notice of the excess, give the purchaser written notice of the seller's intention to pay some, all, or none of the excess amount. If the seller elects to pay less than the full amount, the excess cost, the purchaser may elect to pay the balance, cancel the contract, or the purchaser's election may be in writing. So this is what's great. If the purchaser wants to pay the difference of the balance, they can. If they want to pay all of the balance, they can. For example, we have an appraisal gap on a VA where they're supposed to pay the whole balance. They can do that. They've already agreed to in writing. If they change their mind, can they get out? Yes, this VA addendum does supersede. We know that. If you think that it doesn't, you're wrong. Any addenda is going to supersede your contract. So whatever you write under additional terms, I want to show you a clause here in the contract with an appraisal gap that's written by attorneys. It doesn't matter. This still will supersede that. They can still get out, okay, guys? But it doesn't matter. At least you have a binding agreement that they plan on paying the difference.
Carrie,
It's not as if your money's spent.
can you
What's that?
strike it an initial?
Can you what?
Can you strike the part that is not agreed upon an initial?
It's really tough to do that with a VA. You want the VA administration after you? I wouldn't. Good luck with that. VA is a tough one, but you're talking about somebody who served, and if you're looking for honor, that's probably your best person anyway. So I would go hands down any day with a VA over a regular person if they're putting the word to it. Doesn't mean that they're not going to do it, but I think you get a better shot at it. Because 9 out of 10 times the person who served, who fought for his country or her country, you know what I mean, is probably going to stick to their word. Will they? You never know. But I think you got a better shot at it. And to that end, I'm going to go over here to dot loop. Let me open one more dot loop so I don't have to keep going back. One more dot loop. I want to show you something about appraisal gap that has been added into here, written by an attorney. Again, depending on what and who you're dealing with, it can still be superseded. So always know that. But let's take a quick peek. It's under clauses. Has everybody been to the clause section? Sounds funny, right? Like Santa Claus. But let's take a quick peek at the clauses. Everybody see this? Clauses? Everybody ever go to the clause section?
It always automatically starts.
It does start
top.
So in the clauses, just so you guys see this here. Seller contribution for closing costs. This is as is in lieu of repairs. If you ever have somebody who wants to take money in lieu of repairs, this is written by an attorney. This will close out that the rest of that section.
but you
And-
don't usually like that.
I hate that one.
Don't show it to Maria. Do it
Don't
on a
show it
separate
to
two
me.
exams.
Because now the underwriter can ask you, what were the repairs that need to be done? And it's just anything other than cosmetic, it could open up a whole can of worms.
Yeah, but if you can do this on a separate addendum and you don't show it to you,
Well, then.
But if it changes the price,
Seller's contribution on the CD. You can't have it.
we could do a credit to closing.
Huh?
We could just give you a credit to closing at the end, a letter to title saying we're gonna give a contribution to closing. I do that all the time.
Okay, well, maybe that doesn't get, that's fine.
This
I
is
don't care as long
just
as-
an addenda saying that you're not gonna ask
If
for anything
you
else when
have-
it's closed.
If you have a person that's tight on their cash to close though, and they need this money, we're gonna need to know it. Like if they're,
Oh, you're saying because, well, the money that we're giving them, this is just because we don't feel like doing any repairs and we're gonna give them money instead of doing repairs, and we don't want them to ask for any other things. This is for that pain in the neck customer who keeps asking for this, that, and the other thing. And we're like, we're not doing
well,
anything.
The issue is going to be though, as long as they have enough money to close without that.
Yeah.
But if they have to have that,
Well, no, yeah, exactly. Okay, that makes sense. This is just for that person who just keeps,
so
Nit-
just be
nitpicking,
aware that
nitpicking.
if someone sees that, then they're gonna ask for it.
okay, so this is what I want you to see here. Oh, here's one. This contract is contingent upon buyer being approved by Airbnb as a host and approved assumption by buyer, all paid closing Airbnb bookings. Buyer shall make any applicable application within 5 days of the effective date of this contract, and seller shall cooperate as required by Airbnb. Should buyer be approved at closing, seller shall buy credit buyer and prepaid rents at security deposit received. Any rentals shall straddle the closing date, shaft be prorated. Here you go. That's an Airbnb one. Did anyone know that was in there? So every time I have a situation that's weird, I get a thing from Phil, or if someone else, one of my other teammates has one, we get one from an attorney and we put it in here. Here's another one. Seller is responsible to close out all open and expired permits and to pull permits for all work not properly permitted prior to closing. If you're doing if you I insist on doing an as is, I highly recommend adding that verbiage, because as we know in an as is contract, whose liability is that? The buyer. Yes.
I noticed that's a Miami thing too. A lot of people from Miami want that added.
Yeah, well, because they know that that's exactly what it is. All right, so right here, this is the newest one. Buyer and seller shall acknowledge and agree that if the appraisal of the property obtained by the buyer's lender is insufficient to meet the terms of the loan approval, buyer shall bring to closing funds in the amount of the difference between the appraised value and the agreed upon purchase price, the appraisal gap. Now, you could just leave that, or you could say up to the total gap amount of blank. So you could do that too, depending if you decided amount to. Buyer hereby waives any and all rights provided to buyer pursuant to section. You see this, what they're talking about? This is a part of the financing contingency, and acknowledges and agrees that the buyer will not be due any return of the earnest money if the appraisal is insufficient.
So that supersedes that new part. that they
No.
added.
This will, this supersedes the contract. When you add additional terms, it supersedes the part of the contract.
Okay.
If you add a VA addenda on top of it, it doesn't matter. The VA addenda is going to supersede this. You follow me? Because a VA is always going to have the right to get their money back. Same with an FHA. Financing contingency with an FHA or a VA, they're still going to be able to get their money back. But this will work with conventional. This will work with anything like that. But if there's a separate addenda, and the only one that requires it is FHA or VA, that will supersede. Because anything additional, it's like leapfrog, right? You have this, a contract's written, and then you write into the contract. The thing handwritten into the contract supersedes the regular contract. Now you add another document on top of it. That supersedes the original. Then you add another, so it keeps kind of leapfrogging what you originally had.
So is there any way you have a VA buyer or an FHA buyer, is there any way to confirm that they're gonna pay this?
No.
So you're taking-
They always have the right to cancel the contract and get out. VA and FHA can always get out and get the money back.
Does it say over there that it does not exceed the purchase price? Let's say the appraisal comes in, let's say the price is $480.
Uh-huh.
The appraisal for $470, the same as $50,000 more about asking price, about appraisal.
Agreed upon purchase price.
So the max would be a
Purchase price. Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, with
Now-
this
now
language.
You're right, now they.
Yeah.
Over.
Yeah.
Now I-
Any questions on this, guys? Now, I will tell you, we use this for a VA, and not to piss off the VA, we just went to appraisal gap, not up to the appraisal gap in the amount of, and then we took out the whole rest of this part, buyer agrees to waive the blah, 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 because what's the point of pissing the VA off when you know you can't do it anyway? It can't be done. I mean, you can write that, it doesn't matter. They're not gonna lose their deposit, they're VA. Period. I know that. They know that. I'm not gonna go to the VA administration and say, I'm sorry, Mr. and Mrs. VA administration, we're gonna keep them here. No. So it doesn't matter, but you follow me? But this is great language if you have anybody who is conventional, anybody who's not going to give you that additional addenda, which is only for FHA VA. Nobody else has that addenda. You got it? Any questions?
Where did you see where are the clauses at again?
Under dot loop. And let me show you where. If you start typing it, but you'd have to start kind of using that language and then it'll pop up. But if not, you just go into templates. And as if you were going to go to like Florida Interactive Forms, but you go below that. Let me show you. So see where Florida Interactive Forms are? And then
Yeah.
tasks, clauses. Right there.
Mine must be in a different place.
That'd be weird. Is everybody else is there? Does anybody else see where theirs is? Under Florida Interactive Forms.
Yeah, I remember.
Yeah. So you have documents and that's where all that stuff is. And then you have clauses. Okay, yep. Emily's is there too. It's under tasks.
Well, there's tasks and then there's clauses. underneath it.
Yeah, tasks and then clauses. All right, so any questions on that? So that's the FHA VA addenda. That one gets confused a lot, so you're clear on that one. Let's go look at, I want to look at the kickout clause because that's a good one and a lot of people don't understand that one. And this is something you should be looking at. Did I spell it right? Kick. Here it is, the kickout clause. Now, this is one that Chris did not do, which is interesting, but let's take a, oh, they did do the kickout clause, backup. Oh, that's the Chris one. They did backup contract / kickout clause. They did do it. They just called it a little different. All right, let's look at ours though. So what is the purpose of a kickout clause? Well, let's say you take a contract, but you're still taking backups and you want to be able to put another one in first right if this one is not as good. That's what the kickout clause is. So you might take a first one with a kickout clause while you're taking backups. So seller will have the right to continue to show the property, which you can always show the property, right? But can you show it active? No, there's no such thing called active with contract. That is a thing in the past. You're still going to be pending, but you're going to be pending with backups, allowing backups, which by the way, we are always pending allowing backups. You'd be crazy not to allow backups. So seller will have the right to continue to show the property and solicit and enter into a bona fide backup purchase contract. You can do that now with third parties that are subject to terminate the primary contract. That's the difference. Right now, if you have a contract, you could take a backup contract, but you cannot terminate the first contract. The first contract must fall apart on its own, and then the second contract will go into first position. With a kickout clause, the seller has the option to terminate the first contract. That's the beauty of the kickout clause. So this is how it works. Upon entering into a backup contract, the seller will give the buyer a copy of the backup contract, obviously with the third party's identification and purchase price information, obliterated, to continue with the primary contract. So if the buyer, who's the first contract, says, I want to continue, I want to be the first, the buyer has to make an additional deposit of however much you decide, like it, to the escrow agent within 3 days of the receipt of the backup contract. By giving this additional deposit within the 3 days, now the buyer is also going to waive the contingency to financing and the sale of the buyer's property. So this is usually if somebody has a home to sell contingency, right? So they're waiving all their financing and sale of buyer's property, and the parties will close on the closing day. The additional deposit will be credited to the buyer at closing. If the buyer fails to timely make the additional deposit, the primary contract shall terminate and the buyer shall be refunded the deposit, thereby, waiving all further obligations. So what this means is Emily's representing the buyer, I'm representing the seller. Her buyer is in first place. They have a home to sell. They're trying to sell their home in Atlanta. And I agree to say, okay, we'll take this contract with a kickout clause. Now, Ksenia has another contract. It's a good contract. It's a better contract. So we want her contract. So we go to Emily. We say, Emily, we got a second contract. It's a backup contract. I show the contract to Ksenia's customer without their name, without the purchase price. Now Emily can put down an additional 50 grand, whatever it is, 20 grand, whatever you said, 20 grand, 50 grand. Now her buyers have a choice. They can either pay the extra 20 grand in 3 days. The home to sell contingency is gone and the financing contingency is gone. They either close or they don't. All their money is now hard, or they walk away and get their original deposit back, and Ksenia's buyers move into first position. Sweet, it's a good deal. Yes.
What happens to the additional deposit? Does it go towards what they owed just for the regular purchase price?
So if your buyers say, okay, we could do this, we know our home's gonna close, then you put down the additional 20, let's say the original 20, that $40,000 is gonna go towards their purchase, just like a
Just
normal.
extra.
But if they don't close, they've lost 40 grand.
And it's not changing the price of her original.
Nope, it's just now making 40 grand hard.
Because it sounded like one of the other agents out in the Atlanta area, actually, it sounded like they had something like this where the person got the additional money, but I think maybe they were confused about it. It was this,
Well, their backup cost could have been a little different too.
or
I
is
can't
there
really
one
say.
where they do that?
I mean, hard to say it's Atlanta. I don't know how they do business in Atlanta. Right? I mean, God knows. Any questions, Steve Marie? Any questions on the kickout clause? It's a great way to go, especially if someone has a home to sell, because you can say, yeah, we'll take your offer, but only with a kickout clause. We have one right now in Ocala. We took the home with a kickout clause. But the beautiful thing is, not only if they stay in first place, their home to sell contingency goes bye-bye, but so does their financing contingency. They're hard now on their money if they don't close. You know who does this? Is builders. We did it all the time. You have a home to sell contingency. That means we're not going to start doing anything in your home. As soon as we're ready to go into permitting, that's basically when that gets pulled, your kickout clause, if you will. You either go hard on everything or you're kicked out. We didn't call it a kickout clause, but it's essentially the same thing. Questions? This is a good one. You guys should use this. I think it's a really good one, especially today. Because if you're representing a buyer who has a situation, you could then offer it to a seller to say, we'll do this with a kickout clause. And people may not know what it is, but it will make your offer stronger. Because if people are like, he was gonna accept your offer, you had a home to sell. Well, they might if you did it with a kickout clause. Right? Weren't you the one talking about one with a home to sell?
Yeah.
This could I mean, yours was a little weirder, but
Yeah,
you know,
it's just-
yeah. But
They're waiting.
yeah, that's probably better for
I
them.
thought so.
But you guys see this one? So this is kind of a good one. You guys like this one? Now, let's also talk about another really good one, backup contract. Nobody really understands the backup contract. So if someone says, we want to be a backup, just by saying your backup contract doesn't mean you're a backup contract. So if you really don't want them to truly be a backup contract, you can just say, sure, we'll consider you a backup contract. Does that mean they're a backup contract? No. And if they don't know what they're doing, it could work for your benefit, right? Notice there's two. So we hovered to make sure we picked the right one. But the backup contract is what we would have gotten from Ksenia before we could kick Emily's people out or keep them, right? So this is important. If you really want a backup contract, they need this addenda to make it a backup contract. The backup contract is subject to the termination of a prior contract between seller and a third party for the sale of the property. If the prior executed contract is terminated. So you see, you can't kick them out. They have to be terminated on their own. And seller delivers written notice of the termination to the buyer on or before a certain day. So you could say, listen, we'll be a backup contract up to this date. If it doesn't happen by this date, we're out. You could always do that too, and that's what's good. This contingency shall be removed, and this backup contract shall move into first position. The effective date of the backup contract should be the date the seller delivers written notice of the termination. Buyer may terminate the backup contract by delivering written notice to the seller prior to the date the seller delivers the written notice. So what this is saying is, if you really want to become a backup contract, this is what happens. You actually execute a contract. You have it signed by buyers and sellers with this addenda. You don't deliver any monies because let's say your money say 3 days after the execution of the contract. You don't have an effective date. The effective date is not until I deliver a written notice to Ksenia, you've now moved into first position. Now they're in first position, they have 3 days to deliver their escrows, right? Because the day I send her the notice that she's now in first position, that's effective date. Now she could have said, I only give you to May 15th, otherwise we're out. So if I don't give her notice, now maybe before May 15th, they find another home. So she could always give us written notice before then that they no longer want to be a backup contract. So it doesn't obligate her people either. That's what's good about it. To be a true backup, it's okay because they have the opportunity of being first right of refusal, if you will, but they could always back out up to the date that they tell us, right? Up to May 15th or whatever date they've written here. The second thing is they haven't put any money down because they won't put the money down until I've given notice that they've become first position, right? Does that make sense? Any questions? Okay, so we're at 11. I suggest next week we continue with addenda. Everybody feel good about that? We got a lot more to cover. Yeah.
Agreed.
When you write out the contract,
Yeah.
you write it out like you're writing it out for
A
that day.
regular contract, as
The
if,
dates
yep,
for that
the
day.
dates for that day, because it doesn't matter because you have a backup addenda.
Okay.
And so when you would go ahead and execute this, we would change the date to, well, it doesn't matter because you have the backup addenda and that's the effective date.
Okay.
Mhm.
Very quick question. For this backup addendum, we would need the sellers to still sign it, even if they were already under contract with another buyer.
Yes, so that's exactly right. We'd have the seller sign the entire contract and this, because that means that if and when the other first one goes out, then this one becomes executed. We don't need to do anything else.
Okay, so pretty much it's lip
Automatic.
service. Gotcha. It's only lip service until all that's done. If people say they have a backup contract.
Yeah,
you
if I
will.
say I'm in backup, you have nothing because you don't even have an executed contract, right? To be truly in a backup contract, you have a fully executed contract with this executed, and it becomes only a true first position once you give written notice that the other one has already been fallen through. Yeah.
Do you have to let the purchaser know that you have a backup? Is there
You
any
always
obligation?
want to let the purchaser know you have a backup. I don't know that there's truly an obligation. I've never seen anything in writing that states you must let them know, but I would definitely let them know. Mhm. Did you have a question, Alex?
Just a clause that we don't have the appraisal machines, the gap machines.
We can't find it in the code. So
Yeah.
going back to earlier, it's not showing up for whatever reason under a clause, so we don't know if it's,
Really?
if you have to go in,
Let me see.
Copy and add the clause.
That's weird.
the last thing on both of ours, but I thought I seen
Yeah,
it with
Airbnb.
Let me see.
Airbnb.
Check it again.
It's just that.
No, it's in there, but I hit reshare. Maybe I just had to share it again.
Oh, shared it.
Well, I shared it again, so maybe I need it. Oh, you know what? Maybe I just put it in under, does he have it? I don't know. I just reshared it again. Sometimes Dotloop is special. All right, guys. Sometimes it's special. Does anybody have any other questions?
I do have one more question.
Sure, hit me.
So it involves actually an inspection report in regards to ethics. So we represented both sides of a deal. It did
Okay.
not work out. The
Yeah.
sellers and we have the inspection report. Now that we're back on the market and other people have questions, which we've answered,
Mhm.
because we did not pay for it, would we have to ask the previous buyer for their permission to send it out, or how does that work?
Yeah, because it's not yours. So realistically, I mean, you'd have to ask the buyers if they give permission for the sellers to share it. But most importantly, because they gave it to the buyer, did they give it to the buyers?
Well, the buyers we gave it to the sellers because we were representing both
So
sides,
anything
but
that is structural, that has something to do with the seller's report that says they disclosed, they must have updated, they needed to update the seller's report. Did they
okay.
update the seller's report?
I don't think it was anything structural. Everything actually
If it was
pretty much
like
cosmetic.
must seek further information, like bogus kind of comments like that, that stuff you wouldn't put on a report anyway. If it's having to do with caulking and silly like cosmetic stuff, you don't need to update the seller's report. But if it's something to do with, real polybutylene piping or something having to do with real structural things or something, they found that there was leaking in the roof or, you know what I mean? Like that has to be updated on the seller's report.
Okay.
Anybody else? Nobody? Everybody good?
I have another question, but I may wait till next week.
Okay, well, I hope you guys all got something good from today. And thank you all for being here. And we will continue with our addenda next week. Thanks for coming. Bye.